In his first visit to Washington since 2020, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met separately with U.S. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, and who's the likely Democratic nominee.
Right, discussions were held on the war in Gaza, of course, and the possibility of securing a ceasefire deal during these meetings. Harris sharply pressed Netanyahu for the humanitarian situation in Gaza, underscoring the death of over 39,000 people since the 7th of October.
We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent. Thanks to the leadership of our President Joe Biden, there is a deal on the table for a ceasefire and a hostage deal.
The Vice President's comments were closely monitored for potential changes in U.S. policy towards Israel if she succeeds Biden as president.
Speaking of Biden, in the first face-to-face talks with Netanyahu since he traveled to Israel days after Hamas's attack, the U.S. president continued his push for a ceasefire deal, which has been a subject of negotiation for months now.
A U.S.-backed proposal to release the remaining hostages in Gaza over 3 phases is something that would be a legacy-affirming achievement for Biden, who abandoned his re-election bid and endorsed Harris. It would also be a boon for Harris in her bid to succeed him. While Biden did not make any substantive remark post the meeting, White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said the gaps are closable.
There are gaps that remain, and our team continues to work with our counterparts in the region to see if we can't close those gaps. We believe that they are of a nature where they can be closed and that we can achieve a deal. But it's going to require, as it always does, some leadership, some compromise, and an effort to get there. The President will be reaffirming for Prime Minister Netanyahu that he believes we need to get there and that we need to get there soon.
Meanwhile, mass demonstrations took place outside the White House. Demonstrators carried effigies of Israeli Prime Minister with blood on his hands. It read in bold letters, "Wanted for crimes against humanity." They chanted, "Arrest Netanyahu."
It's on your hands. Including the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who had moral agenda in the support of the State of Israel.
Correspondent Susan Teherani elaborates on the strategic considerations Netanyahu might have had before meeting with Biden now that he has dropped out of the 2024 race. Listen in.
Benjamin Netanyahu may have viewed this meeting as an opportunity to secure concessions and agreements for the next 6 months or so. However, he may have also considered the potential of limitations of Biden's ability to deliver on commitments and the possibility of a successor reversing or modifying existing agreements, notably if that person ends up being Biden's Vice President, Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, Netanyahu must balance his own domestic political considerations, as his meeting with a lame-duck president may also be perceived as a sign of weakness or opportunism by his political opponents, of course. By navigating these complexities, Netanyahu aims to advance Israel's interests while managing the uncertainties of a transitional period in U.S. politics.
Now, Susan further elaborates on the significance of Harris meeting with Netanyahu. Will U.S. policies towards Israel change if Harris wins against Trump and replaces Biden as president? That's the big question. Listen to this.
Kamala Harris's meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu is seen as being crucial, especially after President Joe Biden's decision to not seek re-election and endorse Harris. Israelis were closely watching the meeting to gauge Harris's stance on Israeli policy, particularly given her willingness to acknowledge the human suffering in Gaza. The meeting also indicated how Harris would approach the Israeli-Palestinian conflict if she became president, and whether she will maintain or shift current U.S. policy toward Israel.